In this video, I'm going to go over how to use the Quick Select tool in Photoshop. What I have here is a composite image composed of 4 different photographs, and I brought different elements of each of them into the single composition. And of course, I've done a few more things beyond using the Quick Select tool, but this first video, I'm just going to go over the Quick Select tool to get all of the images into the same Photoshop document. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure I have Photoshop selected, and I'm going to want to make sure that I make a new document that is the size I want it to be. So obviously the size you want it to be is going to depend on your project, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that I'm going to print this, and I am going to go ahead and make this 12 by 10 inches. And since I am printing it, I'm going to want the resolution to be 300. And then I have my new document here. Now I already have open some other images that I'm going to use to make the collage. I also have an alternate image that I'm going to use to go over the Quick Select tool in more detail. And that's because the first couple of images are going to be really easy to quick select because there's a very strong contrast between the background and, in this case, the dog that I want to select, right? The dog is really dark, the background is really light, so it should be pretty easy to do. So I'll start with this image. And this image is also kind of easy because it's already like a photograph, it's already flat, so it should be a little bit easier for Photoshop to deal with it. So I have my Quick Select tool selected. It is the 4th tool down. It might be underneath the Object Selection tool, which is a newer tool, and sometimes it can be great to use because it will make quick selecting a little bit easier. But I'm just going to go over the Quick Select tool itself because once you know how to use the Quick Select tool, the Object Selection tool will just be a nice shortcut. So Quick Selection tool is hidden underneath the Object Selection tool, so you need to click and hold here to then reveal the Quick Selection tool. You have your options up top here. When I'm first starting out with this tool, I like to use the plus and the minus brushes. The plus will add to your selection and the minus will subtract. Now hopefully if you have images where there's a strong contrast between your subject and your background, you won't even have to use the minus brush, but we are going to go over how to use it in a little bit. So I like to start out by choosing a brush size that's pretty big because that will make my quick selection go faster. And of course, the downside of going faster is it's going to be a little bit less accurate. So when I have it, I'm just going to start painting. So I'm clicking my mouse down and moving towards the edge. I'm making sure I'm not going over the edge. If I was to click here with my cursor halfway between the background and my subject, I would be confusing Photoshop. The way this tool works is it looks for pixels of similar pixels. So it could be similar color, similar value, or even a similar sharpness, right? If there's in focus and out of focus pixels. And so I'm just working towards the outside and hoping that Photoshop will find the edge, and it's doing a very good job of finding the edge. And every now and again, I'm just going to let go of my cursor and then click again so I have different steps, so I'm not just painting it in one fell swoop. This way it's also easier to undo just a particular part if I do accidentally click over like this and confuse Photoshop. I can always go to Edit and Undo, or press Command and Z on a Mac, or Control and Z on a Windows computer. Now I have a pretty good selection. It's a little, maybe I want to get a little bit more up here. And if I want to get a little bit more up here without going over, I'm going to have to make my brush smaller. So I'm going to go do that. And that's good. Now, if I were to simply just take this selection and copy and paste it, I would have pretty rough edges. So I'm just going to actually go ahead and do that so you can see the difference. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go to my untitled document and paste it in. And you can see the selection's pretty good, but since we're dealing with fur, and also when we're dealing with hair, we're losing some of the strands. And the way to get a better selection with that is to go to make sure I'm on the Quick Select tool, and then go to Select and Mask. And when I do that, this opens up a separate dialog. The tools on the left have changed, and the options on the right have changed. You might also see a different view. You might see black and white or onion skin. And for this demo, I'm going to use the black and white view because this lets me see the edge really well. And when I have fur or hair, I want to go to my edge detection radius and I want to start increasing it. And at some point, we will start to see we're getting much more detail around the edge, and we're actually starting to see fine strands of hair. Now, the amount of radius you use depends on the image, because at some point, you're going to be starting to capture too much of the surroundings. I'm starting to get some of the detail in the wood boards, for example, which I do not want. And I might be getting a little too transparent on the edges here. So it seems to me that somewhere around 32 and 40 is probably pretty good. So we're going to go with 35 for this. So I'm going to click, I'm also going to feather it just 1 pixel, because usually I'm going to want to feather stuff just a little bit because it's going to make it blend together better, and I'll go over that in a minute. So I'm going to click OK, and now when I go to Edit and Copy, and go to paste it in here, and I'm going to use the shortcut for paste, which is Command and V. I now have 2 layers here, and we can see here, before I did the edge detection, I get a kind of sloppy edge, and then here really is much better. It actually looks like the fur is fur. We get the curls, it's got a nice edge, and it's much better. So I'm going to go ahead and delete by dragging to the trash can. The selection is not as good. And now I'm going to go ahead and move to my next document here. So this might be a little bit harder to use the quick select tool because the contrast between the background and my subject, the shell, is not quite as great. But let's see. So I'm going to start again. I'm going to start with a larger brush. All right, the exact size doesn't matter. I would just kind of eyeball it, so it seems big enough to do the trick, and that will take a little bit of practice, but it'll start to make sense. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller to get some of this detail here. Okay, and then that looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. And now this one I'm not going to have to do edge detection, but I still do want to go to Select and Mask, because I'm always going to want to feather my selections. And when I'm bringing stuff into collage, usually about a pixel feather is great. Sometimes when I'm making a reflection or a shadow, I might increase the feather more. And so we can start to see what happens when it increases. It softens the edge. And just having it just a tiny bit soft is really great to have 2 photos blend together. So I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to go to Edit and Copy. Come here, and I'm going to paste it in. Now I have another image that is just a background, so I don't need to use the quick select tool for this. I can either grab my rectangular marquee tool and draw a rectangle out to select the whole thing, or use my select drop down menu and select all, or press Command and A. Once I have that, I can copy and paste it into my collage document. Now here, the layer order is messed up. And so when you are pasting stuff into the document, you want to keep a good layer order. So I can move the layers around. I simply do that by holding a layer, clicking on it, and then clicking and dragging it either above or below the layer that I want. I can then use my move tool to move it around. In other videos, I'm going to go into other ways to start to make your composition really hold together. Now, those were all pretty easy, quick selections. I want to go over a slightly more complex one, and that is this image. And this image, the quick select tool is not going to work quite as well because if I want to select the Elvis here, there's a lot of other similar areas, so the quick select tool is going to take a little bit longer to work for me. And so what I'm going to want to do is start by zooming in to my subject, and so I have the magnifying glass tool down at the bottom here, and if I click and drag to the right, I'll zoom in, and if I click and drag to the left, I'll zoom out. I also have other options up here, but basically that's what I like to use. So I want to get Elvis pretty close so I can really see what I'm doing. I want to grab my quick select tool, make sure it's on the plus, and then start painting in here. And I'm going to make sure I don't go over the edge, but I'm not going to be worried too much about where the quick select tool is over selecting. We can see it's grabbing some on the wall that I don't want, some of the wall I don't want here. I'm not worried about that yet. I'm just going to try to get the area that I want selected first, and then I can go back in and refine the edge. And the nice thing about the quick select tool is the more you use it on the particular selection you're making, the more Photoshop learns what you want to select. So you have to kind of go back and forth. And what that means is first you want to just get your subject, everything selected, and not worry so much about it going over. So let me just get the shoes selected here, get the edge of the guitar selected, get his thumb selected. Okay, so it looks like I have everything selected, so now I can go back in and start removing some of the selection. So this is where the minus brush comes in. I'm going to go to the minus brush and then get rid of the parts that I don't want. And what's going to happen is it's probably going to go too far back, so then I can go back to my plus brush, be like, wait, you went too far, and then get the microphone, and then get the hair. And then it goes too far back the other direction, so back to the minus brush. And again, I just want to make sure I don't go and confuse Photoshop by accidentally kind of hovering over both parts. As long as I don't do that, when I go back and forth, I'll eventually get the selection that I want, which is right here. It just took a couple of different times of going back and forth. And so now I can go back to the minus brush. I can get rid of this wall here. I can get rid of this wall here. All right, and so I'm just going in, going to the plus, getting this part of the pants, which then went too far this way, so now I can go to the minus brush again, paint in there, plus brush, paint in here. And really, it's just a back and forth. And you can also do this in the select and mask dialog, but I think it's helpful to get it as close as you can before going into select and mask. And this looks pretty close. So now I am going to click select and mask. And first, I do want to be in my view. I want to be in my black and white view. Since I went back and forth a lot, there's going to be all these kind of stray lines here. And when I have these stray lines, I'm going to want to go to my paintbrush tool, select the minus brush. What this is going to do is simply going to let me paint over these to remove them. And I'm just going to remove these little bits here before I look at a different view, because I just know that I don't want this, and it's easiest to see these, I almost call them selection artifacts. But I don't want to go too close in, and once I get those removed, I can go to my overlay so I can really see both, and then I can really start to zoom in on some areas that I know I want to fix. And I'm going to go back to my brush. It's kind of, this is like a fully manual, just paint what you don't want. I'm going to paint what I don't want. I'm losing the kind of, some of the guitar, but I think that's okay. We're getting the main shape. I think that's really the only place I want to minus, maybe a little bit, yeah, a little bit around the shoe here I want to get rid of. But then mostly, at this point, I want to add to a few places. So I'm going to go magnifying glass. I'm going to click and drag to the left to zoom out just a little bit. Go back to my brush, go to the plus symbol. I'm going to paint in this weird kind of cutout here. And then that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do my pixel feather. And again, you don't have to be exact here. Click OK. Then I'm going to use my copy shortcut, Command and C, and paste Elvis in here. Get rid of that. And now I kind of have the birth of Elvis rather than the birth of Venus here. And that is the basics of using quick select to select parts of an image to then kind of collage different images together.